Aborted engine start. Engine start lever. Affected engine cut off. Engine tailpipe fire. Engine start lever. Affected engine cut off. Airspeed unreliable. Adjust the airplane attitude and thrust. Maintain airplane control. Pitot-static heat switches. Check on. Cross-check the Mach airspeed indicators. APU fire. APU fire switch. Confirm, pull, and rotate to the stop for 1 second. APU switch off. Cabin altitude or rapid depressurization required by Airworthiness Directive 2011-03-14. Recall. Oxygen mask and regulators on 100%. Crew communications establish. Reference, pressurization mode selector, manual, outflow valve switch, close. Hold and close until the outflow valve indication shows fully closed. Choose one. If cabin altitude is uncontrollable, emergency descent, if required, initiate. Passenger oxygen on, advise. Advise occupants to use oxygen. Passenger signs on. Go to the emergency descent checklist if required. If cabin altitude is controllable, continue manual operation to maintain correct cabin altitude. When the cabin altitude is at or below 10,000 feet, oxygen masks may be removed. Emergency descent. Announce the emergency descent. The pilot flying will advise couriers of impending rapid descent. The pilot monitoring will advise ATC and obtain area altimeter setting. Without delay, descend to the lowest safe altitude or 10,000 feet, whichever is higher. Engine start switches, both continuous. Thrust levers, both close. Reduce thrust to minimum or as needed for anti-ice. Speed brakes, flight detent. If structural integrity is in doubt, limit speed as much as possible and avoid high maneuvering loads. Target speed to MMO, VMO. Engine fire or severe damage or separation. Auto throttles, if engaged, disengage. Thrust lever, affected engine, confirm, close. Engine start lever, affected engine, confirm, cut off. Engine fire switch, affected engine, confirm, pull. To manually unlock the engine fire switch, press the override and pull. If the engine fire switch or engine overheat light stays illuminated, engine fire switch, rotate to the stop and hold for 1 second. If, after 30 seconds, the engine fire switch or engine overheat light stays illuminated, engine fire switch, rotate to the other stop and hold for 1 second. Engine limit or surge or stall. Auto throttles, if engaged, disengage. Thrust lever, affected engine, confirm, retard until indications stay within limits or the thrust lever is closed. Engine overheat. Auto throttles, if engaged, disengage. Thrust lever, affected engine, confirm, close. If the engine overheat light stays illuminated, go to the engine fire checklist on page 8.2. Engine tailpipe fire. Engine start lever, affected engine, cut off. Landing configuration. Assure correct airplane landing configuration. Loss of thrust on both engines. Engine start switches, both, flight. Engine start levers, both, cut off. When EGT decreases, engine start levers, both, idle detent. If EGT reaches 930 degrees Celsius or there is no increase in EGT within 30 seconds, engine start lever, affected engine, confirm, cut off, then idle detent. If EGT again reaches 930 degrees Celsius or there is no increase in EGT within 30 seconds, repeat as needed. Overspeed. Reduce thrust and, if needed, adjust attitude to reduce airspeed to less than VMO MMO. Runaway stabilizer. Control column, hold firmly. Autopilot, if engaged, disengage. Do not re-engage the autopilot. Control airplane pitch attitude manually with control column and main electric trim as needed. If the runaway stops, continue normal operations. If the runaway continues, stab trim cutout switches, both cutout. If the runaway continues, stabilizer trim wheel, grasp and hold. Flight deck or courier area smoke, fire, or fumes. Diversion may be needed. Don oxygen masks and set regulators to 100% as needed. Don smoke goggles as needed. If smoke or fumes affect vision, use the emergency position on the oxygen regulator to clear the goggles. Establish crew communications. Bus transfer switch, off. Recirc fan switches, off. APU bleed air switch, off. Anytime the smoke or fumes become the greatest threat, go to the smoke or fumes removal checklist on page 8.26. Takeoff configuration. Assure correct airplane takeoff configuration. Uncommanded rudder, yaw, or roll. Autopilot, if engaged, disengage. Maintain control of the airplane with all available flight controls. If roll is uncontrollable, immediately reduce pitch, angle of attack, and increase airspeed. Do not attempt to maintain altitude until control is recovered. Auto throttles, if engaged, disengage. Verify thrust is symmetrical. Warning horn, intermittent or warning light, cabin altitude, or takeoff configuration. If the intermittent warning horn sounds or the cabin altitude light as installed illuminates in flight at an airplane flight altitude above 10,000 feet MSL, don the oxygen masks and set the regulators to 100%, establish crew communications, go to the cabin altitude warning or rapid depressurization checklist required by Airworthiness Directive 2011-0314 on page 2.1. If the intermittent warning horn sounds or the takeoff config light, as installed, illuminates on the ground, assure correct airplane takeoff configuration.